Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're not just looking at a filmmaker. I mean, we are, but we're really diving into an entire cinematic history, all embodied by one towering figure, Martin Charles Scorsese.
It's such an essential deep dive, especially when you look at the sheer scope of the source material we have here. We're talking about a 6-decade career.
6 decades. It's incredible.
It really is. From his humble roots in New York's Little Italy, all the way through the explosion of New Hollywood to what he is now.
A global preservationist.
Yeah.
One of the last true auteurs in American cinema.
Exactly.
And that's our mission today, right? To go far beyond just the greatest hits reel. I mean, everybody knows the tracking shot in Goodfellas.
Or the You Talking to Me save.
Of course.
Yeah.
But we want to understand the foundational influences. The sickness, the religion, the European art house films that really build his moral architecture.
And how all of those things, those core elements consistently inform the techniques he uses to explore what you called American myth and moral turmoil.
The output is just. It really does speak for itself. The critical acclaim is staggering.
It is. He's got that Academy Award for Best Director for The Departed, which was so long deserved.
So long.
But it's beyond the hardware, The BAFTAs, the Emmys, the Golden Globes, it's the institutional recognition.
That's the key.
I mean, he got the AFI Life Achievement Award way back in 1997.
On 87. And then the Kennedy Center Honor in 2007, the BAFTA Fellowship in 2012. He's been an institution for decades.
And the cultural impact is it's measurable. You can actually point to it. 4 of his films.
4. It's amazing.
Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas. They're not just beloved films. They've been officially inducted into the National Film Registry.
Which means they are considered foundational. Culturally significant works that have to be preserved forever.
4 pillars of modern American cinema, all from one man.
That kind of stature, I think, it demands that we understand the soil he grew from. You can't really get the moral landscape of his films without the physical landscape of his youth.
Let's start there then, the immediate environment that shaped his whole vision.
Okay, so let's unpack it. Martin Charles Scorsese, born in Queens, 1942. But his formative years, the ones that really matter for his art, were spent in the heart of Manhattan's Little Italy.
And he was the child of Sicilian-American parents, that very tight working-class Italian-American experience. That's the world he would later put on screen.
It was his whole world. Vibrant, volatile, immediate.
And that family environment didn't just give him the subject matter, it gave him the talent. His parents, Charles and Catherine Scorsese, they worked in the garment district.
Right. Charles was a clothes presser, Catherine a seamstress.
But they were also actors. And they became these frequent, wonderful collaborators in his films.
Which gives his early work this incredible immediate authenticity. It's that real, unfiltered neighborhood voice.
I think that inclusion, having his own parents in the movies, it says everything about his approach. It wasn't about hiring polished actors to portray this life.
No, it was about integrating his actual world into his art.
Exactly. And that grounding gives his films a texture that you don't see in the films that try to copy his style.
The authenticity is personal. It's not manufactured.
And you can trace that lineage back even further. His grandparents were Sicilian immigrants from Polizzi Generosa and Simena. And this is where we find this fascinating little detail about the name.
Yes. The original family name was actually Scorsese.
Which means Scot or Scottish in Italian.
It was a transcription error, right, when they arrived.
Just a mistake. But it's such a small but powerful detail. It illustrates that kind of foundational confusion, that shifting identity that's so central to the immigrant experience.
And to his characters, who are always caught between two worlds.
But his primary education, his real classroom, wasn't on the streets. The single most crucial, defining fact of his childhood wasn't community sports or street life. It was isolation.
He had severe chronic asthma as a boy.
And that illness is really the key to his whole artistic sensibility.
Because he couldn't run around, he couldn't play sports, he couldn't do the rough and tumble stuff with the other kids. He was sidelined. He was forced to be an observer.
So his family, to keep him occupied, they just took him to the movies. Constantly.
So that seclusion, it turned the cinema into his social and emotional laboratory.
Think about that. He was learning about honor, violence, love, betrayal, not from doing it, but from watching these heightened, stylized versions of life on a screen.
It completely shaped his art. If he'd been out on the field, maybe he'd be making movies about teamwork.
Right. Or external conflict.
But because he was inside, watching, his films were all about the interior life. Guilt, paranoia, The violence that brews inside a solitary man.
Characters like Travis Bickle or Jake LaMotta, they're these intense loners, even when they're surrounded by people.
That's the lens of this sick kid who became a cinephile.
And that cinephilia wasn't just, what was playing down the street. His passion ignited this ferocious appetite for all of film history, global film history.
And his influences are so diverse. The tension between them, between high art and low genre, that's what creates his style.
That's a great way to put it.
So what were the big ones? The cornerstone foreign works that really shaped him in that theater?
Well, he was deeply, deeply affected by British cinema, particularly the visual audacity of Powell and Pressburger.
Black Narcissus and the Red Shoes.
Especially the Red Shoes. It was like a blueprint for how you could use color and operatic melodrama to express what's going on inside someone's head. He didn't just love them, he studied them.
And he was committed, even as a teenager. The source material notes he would commute all the way to the Bronx.
Just to rent a reel.
A single reel of their even more obscure film, The Tales of Hoffman.
And here's where the story gets kind of incredible. We know who the only other person was who was regularly renting that exact same rare reel from that specific store.
George A. Romero.
George A. Romero. It's unbelievable. Two future legends, one defined by internal violence, the other by external apocalypse, unknowingly sharing this one specific influential piece of art.
Wow. That's a powerful origin story for that whole new Hollywood generation. But he was also absorbing the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Exactly. World cinema that was all about gritty, ground-level reality.
You mean Italian neorealism?
Precisely. You see the deep imprint of masters like Roberto Rossellini, his films Rome, Open City, and Paisa.
And Isika's Bicycle Thieves.
They showed him the power of authenticity, of using non-professional actors shooting on location in the middle of all this social decay.
And that tension between the artificial controlled expressionism of the Red Shoes and the raw observational truth of Rome, Open City. That's the whole Scorsese universe right there.
It is. His films are basically Italian near-realist dramas staged with the extreme lighting and color of Powell and Pressburger.
You could literally see it. The documentary energy of mean streets next to the distorted psychological boxing scenes in Raging Bull.
And he even made a documentary about it, Il mio viaggio, in Italia, where he traces that influence. He talks about watching the Sicilian episode of Paisa on TV with his family and how it felt like this direct connection to his heritage.
He also loved the American masters, though. John Ford's Westerns.
Oh, yeah. The Quiet Man, and especially The Searchers.
And you can't talk about Taxi Driver without talking about The Searchers.
Absolutely not. Ford's vision of the isolated man on a quest for redemption or vengeance in a corrupt world, that's a theme Scorsese comes back to over and over.
And Alfred Hitchcock, of course, Vertigo.
Which he said he responded to very strongly. It was a masterclass in controlled paranoia and visual subjectivity.
So he's already operating like an academic here, which explains his next step, even though he had a very different plan at first.
He did. He wanted to be a priest, attended preparatory seminary.
But he failed out after the first year.
It's hard to imagine American cinema without that one minor failure.
The path to the pulpit closed, and the path to the director's chair opened up. He went to NYU. Got a BA in English in '64 and an MA in film in '68.
And NYU gave him key mentors, like Professor Haig P. Manoogian. It also gave him hands-on experience, even if he wasn't, a natural at everything.
Right. He said he was terrible at judging focus when he was an assistant cameraman.
But the learning was invaluable. He even worked as an editor for CBS News for a while before deciding to pursue his own vision.
And that vision finally came together with his feature debut, Who's That Knocking at My Door, in 1967.
And this film is essential, not just for what it is, but for who it introduced. Two of his most indispensable collaborators, Harvey Keitel.
And most importantly, the editor, Thelma Schoonmaker.
That film immediately signaled something was happening. Roger Ebert, in his first review of Scorsese, called it a great moment in American movies.
And he recognized that mix of American sincerity with the raw freshness of the New York underground, like John Cassavetes.
And Cassavetes was so important. He was a mentor who pushed Scorsese to make personal projects, the films he wanted to make.
The irony, though, is that it was a commercial B-movie gig that taught him some crucial lessons.
Roger Corman. Boxcar Bertha in 1972. Corman's school of filmmaking was simple. Make it entertaining, make it fast, and make it cheap.
And that discipline proved invaluable later on.
So he's got the European art house, the neorealist grit, the American Western myth, the Catholic guilt, and the Corman efficiency.
That explosive cocktail finally came together in 1973, the official breakthrough.
That era starts definitively with Mean Streets. And it wasn't just a win for Scorsese, it was the breakthrough for him, for Keitel, and for Robert De Niro.
Their first true collaboration, it established everything.
And this is where the Scorsese style just hits you in the face, the macho posturing, the raw language, the bursts of violence.
And that undeniable sense of Catholic guilt just simmering under everything.
It's so funny, the sources remind us that most of it was actually shot in LA.
But it feels so intensely New York.
Ooh, it's the editing and the soundtrack that made it revolutionary, though. Pauline Kael called it a triumph of personal filmmaking.
She said that if it had subtitles, critics would be praising a new European or South American talent, a new Buñuel.
She was pointing out that this level of personal kinetic art was usually only associated with foreign auteurs, not some young American working in a genre film.
The rock and roll. It's not just background music, it's like a third character.
The slow motion walk into the bar set to Be My Baby. It turns a simple entrance into this moment of cinematic ecstasy and preordained doom.
That set the blueprint for the next 50 years. But then he took a detour with Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Right, a female-centric film that won Ellen Burstyn an Oscar. It showed he had range, but his definitive statement was next. Taxi Driver, 1976.
The ultimate expression of the isolated observer, won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. This is where his other crucial collaboration begins, with the writer Paul Schrader.
And Schrader's script had this layered origin. It drew from the diary of Arthur Bremer, the guy who shot George Wallace.
And significantly, John Ford's The Searchers.
Yes. The isolation of Travis Bickle, driving through this polluted city. It mirrors John Wayne's Ethan Edwards, the obsessive outsider, trying to save a girl from a system he despises.
That blend of high art existentialism and low pulp vigilante fantasy is what made it so electric.
And, tragically, so controversial 5 years later.
When John Hinckley Jr., who was obsessed with the film, tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan.
It forced a really uncomfortable conversation about cinematic influence, and it's something Scorsese has always taken seriously. But after that peak, he stumbled.
New York in 1977. The big budget musical.
And its commercial failure was devastating for him. On top of that, he was suffering from a serious cocaine addiction, which led to depression and internal bleeding. He was in the hospital. He hit rock bottom.
The story of him being in the hospital, convinced he was going to die. It's legendary. And this is where the redemption narrative starts.
It really is. Robert De Niro essentially saved his life. He came to him with the script for Raging Bull,
the violent biopic of boxer Jake LaMotta.
And he urged Scorsese to channel all his physical and psychological despair into this brutal character study. Scorsese called it a kamikaze method of filmmaking. He thought it might be his last movie.
It turned out to be anything but. Raging Bull is considered a masterpiece. The greatest film of the 1980s. According to Sight and Sound, it was the zenith of his style.
We have to talk about the technical choices here because they're the emotional content. Shooting in high contrast, black and white, that wasn't just for show.
No, it strips away the glamour of boxing and forces you to confront the ugliness of LaMotta's life.
What's so amazing is that right after the operatic chaos of Raging Bull, he makes a film as static and restrained as the king of comedy.
Was that a deliberate rejection of his own style?
I think it was a profound reaction. For the king of comedy, he had deliberately shifted to a static camera, long takes. It was perfect for the subject. Rupert Pupkin is trapped in the static frame of celebrity media.
He's literally incapable of moving beyond the fantasy of fame.
And Scorsese himself says De Niro's performance as Pupkin is the best work they ever did together.
High praise. And it was after Raging Bull that his films started getting labeled a Martin Scorsese picture. It became a brand.
After the commercial disappointment of King of Comedy, he took on a few other projects. After Hours, which won him Best Director at Cannes, and The Color of Money with Paul Newman,
which was a clear commercial play to finance his real passion project.
The Last Temptation of Christ in 1988. He had tried to make it for years, but Paramount pulled the plug because of pressure from religious groups.
So Universal made a deal with him?
They'd finance it, but only if he agreed to direct the more mainstream thriller Cape Fear for them later.
And the resulting film was hugely controversial, with protests and bomb threats.
It really showed he was willing to risk his career for a deeply personal theological exploration. It was a necessary step on the road to his later masterpiece, Silence.
Which brings us right into the core of his work, the themes that bind all these films together. Let's start with religious guilt.
It's probably the single most prominent theme in his work. It flows right from his Catholic upbringing and his failure to become a priest.
It's not just Catholic imagery either. It's an explicit examination of how Catholicism creates and deals with this deep, crippling sense of sin.
It's everywhere, from Charlie in Mean Streets burning his fingers to atone for his cousin's debts, to the internal struggles in nearly every film. It's a cinema of confession and penance.
And that theme really comes to a head with his later work, confirming that his relationship with his faith has only gotten deeper.
Absolutely. Silence, which came out in 2016, was a passion project he'd been developing for over 26 years.
It deals directly with a crisis of faith, apostasy, the silence of God in the face of suffering.
And in discussing that film, Scorsese explicitly said, "I am most comfortable as a Catholic." A big shift from his earlier identity as a lapsed Catholic.
So you have the internal battle of sin and grace, but the external world in his films is just as morally compromised.
It's systemic rot. It's not just a few bad apples. His films are full of corrupt police, politicians, business leaders.
His early films focused on the individual gangster, but as he moved into films like Goodfellas and Casino, the critique became much more sociological.
And then with The Irishman, Richard Brody called it a socio-political horror story
Wow.
because it showed every level of society poisoned by graft and impunity. The mobsters aren't outside the system. They are the system. They influence elections, control unions.
The horror isn't the violence. It's the spiritual void created by a society where sin is just another word for power.
Exactly. And in that system, there's no redemption because the entire structure is corrupt.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics. The visual fingerprints that make a Scorsese picture instantly recognizable.
First, you have the pacing devices, extensive use of slow motion, freeze frames, and voiceover narration.
Let's talk about the freeze frame. It's so specific to his crime epics.
It is. You see it in Goodfellas, Casino, The Irishman, and what it does is it strips agency from the character and documents their fate.
It's like the film is saying, stop, this moment right here, this is where it all went wrong.
It's a godlike perspective, documenting the fall from grace. When Jimmy Conway is frozen at the end of Goodfellas, his fate is sealed. It's a historical record of failure.
And then there's the specific visual trope of the angelic blonde.
Yes, the angelic blonde. It's a visual signature, a subtle nod to Hitchcock, maybe. His blonde leading ladies are always introduced as angelic and ethereal.
Usually wearing white, usually in slow motion.
Exactly. Think of Kathy Moriarty in her white bikini in Raging Bull. A vision of impossible purity in a brutal black and white world.
Or Sharon Stone in her white minute dress in Casino.
They represent this potential for escape that the self-destructive male protagonist always ends up corrupting or ruining. They're more symbol than character.
But maybe his most famous device is the aggressive camera movement, the long tracking shot set to popular music.
The Copacabana entrance in Goodfellas is the classic example, but he uses it to convey this rush of power and euphoria in so many films.
It violently immerses you in the character's headspace during a moment of supreme confidence.
You're dragged along, sharing their adrenaline rush, and the music choice is so crucial. Often it's the Rolling Stones' Gimme Shelter.
He uses it in Goodfellas, Casino, and The Departed.
It's a leitmotif for impending chaos. It instantly signals that the glamour is about to collide violently with reality.
And for the real cinephiles, you can't overlook his constant visual homages to film history.
The iris transition, that black circle closing in on the screen.
That's a direct homage to 1920s silent films.
He uses it strategically in Casino and Hugo. It's a formal nod that reminds you this film is part of a much longer conversation.
He's reminding you that the language you're watching has a century vocabulary behind it. And that's why his collaborations are so critical. He needs a team that speaks his language.
You have two major actor dynasties. First, the iconic partnership with Robert De Niro, 10 feature films.
De Niro's characters for Scorsese are generally volatile, self-destructive, driven by this internal madness. Jake LaMotta, Travis Bickle, Jimmy Conway.
And then you have the new muse for the 21st century, Leonardo DiCaprio, 6 feature films so far.
It's an interesting contrast.
It is. While De Niro often played the raw, street-level guy, DiCaprio often plays the character who is constrained by the system.
The detective in The Departed, the financial manipulator in The Wolf of Wall Street.
DiCaprio's characters are ambitious figures trying to fit into or break a powerful institution, whereas De Niro's were often outside of them completely.
Which suggests a shift in Scorsese's own focus, maybe from the lone madman to systemic corruption.
And beyond the actors, the crew is irreplaceable. Thelma Schoonmaker, his editor. She's arguably his most essential collaborator.
3 Oscars for his films. She's the rhythm and the violence of his movies. Without her editing, the Scorsese style just doesn't exist.
And the cinematographers are just as important. Michael Ballhaus, Robert Richardson, Rodrigo Prieto. These are the artists who translated his Catholic guilt into high-contrast imagery.
And you have to mention Saul and Elaine Bass, who did the title design for Hitchcock. They brought that graphic genius to Goodfellas, Casino, Cape Fear.
We also often see the director himself, right? He frequently makes cameos or provides narration. He's always in there somewhere.
He's the off-screen ambulance dispatcher in Bringing Out the Dead.
Yeah.
A non-speaking photographer in The Age of Innocence.
And his voice opens mean streets and guides The Color of Money. And of course the cameos from his parents, which further blurs that line between his life and his art.
Moving into his later career, we see him applying these themes to more mainstream projects, which leads to massive success, and finally, that Oscar.
It all started with The Departed in 2006, an adaptation of the Hong Kong thriller Infernal Affairs, but set in Boston.
It became his highest-grossing film at the time, and, crucially, it finally got him the Best Director Oscar.
What's fascinating about this later era, though, is his willingness to experiment. In 2011, he directs Hugo.
A family adventure film. In 3D, a huge departure.
But the 3D was intentional. It's a film about the magic of cinema, about Georges Méliès. He used the technology to create a sense of wonder. It got 11 Oscar nominations.
He followed that up with 2 massive collaborations with DiCaprio, The Wolf of Wall Street in 2013.
And then the reunion of Titans, The Irishman, in 2019.
Which brought back De Niro, Pesci, and Al Pacino for this sprawling, reflective epic.
And it used another technological leap, de-aging technology, to explore memory, regret, and the slow decay of old age. 10 Oscar nominations for that one.
And most recently, Killers of the Flower Moon in 2023. This later period just proves he's still restless, still urgent.
And beyond the narrative features, his documentary work is formidable, especially with music.
His work with music is so key. He directed The Last Waltz, the film about the band's final concert.
And No Direction Home about Bob Dylan, which won him a Grammy.
He treats rock musicians with the same deep respect he gives gangsters and priests. The Rolling Stones drummer said Marty did an amazing job of making us look great in Shine a Light.
And he brought that aesthetic to TV, too. Won an Emmy for directing the pilot of Boardwalk Empire.
Plus the acclaimed documentaries about Fran Lebowitz, public speaking, and Pretend It's a City.
But maybe his most profound legacy, the one that affects all of film history, is his relentless advocacy for film preservation.
This is monumental, and it ties right back to him as that isolated kid who revered the red shoes.
In 1990, he co-founded the Film Foundation with Coppola, Lucas, Spielberg, all the big names.
And what are the results of that?
As of 2020, the foundation has helped restore well over 850 films worldwide. Without this work, massive portions of global film history would just vanish.
He spearheaded the restoration of the red shoes himself, didn't he?
He did, painstakingly restoring the Technicolor palette. He was saving a key part of his own history and cinema's history at the same time.
Then he expanded that mission globally in 2007 with the World Cinema Project,
which specifically targets marginalized films from regions that don't have the money or technology to preserve their own history. It's about making sure global voices aren't erased.
The impact here is so tangible. They've restored masterpieces like Ousmane Sembène's Black Girl from Senegal. They've fundamentally rewritten the canon of global film history.
And then, in 2017, the African Film Heritage Project, a joint initiative with UNESCO dedicated to locating and preserving 50 classic African films.
This elevates him from a great director to an essential cultural archivist.
And the industry knows it. Sam Mendes at the Golden Globes said there's not one director in this room that is not in the shadow of Martin Scorsese.
And Bong Joon-ho, when he won his Oscar for Parasite, quoted Scorsese, "The most personal is the most creative."
And the whole room gave Scorsese a standing ovation. It was this recognition that his personal vision legitimized deeply felt, non-commercial filmmaking for everyone.
Before we wrap up, we have to mention the sense of urgency he feels right now. He said it in an interview. "I'm old. I want to tell stories and there's no more time."
And that urgency is fueling a huge pipeline of projects. A Grateful Dead biopic, a reunion with DiCaprio for The Wager.
And, most tellingly, a new film about Jesus based on another book by Shisaku Endo, the author of Silence. He's returning to the theological questions that have haunted his whole career.
It's an exhausting slate for a filmmaker who feels time is slipping away, but it speaks to his relentless drive.
Let's briefly touch on some of the personal details. He's been married 5 times currently to Helen Schermerhorn Morris since 1999. 3 children.
And two of his daughters, Domenica and Francesca, are involved in film. Francesca has appeared in The Departed and Hugo. It keeps that family connection going.
We also tracked his evolving religious identity from lapsed Catholic to declaring in 2016, I am most comfortable as a Catholic.
And in terms of politics, he has been public with his opinions. He opposed the Iraq War. In 2025, he criticized the Trump administration for what he saw as a lack of compassion. We just report that as fact.
We also have to note he recently settled a 2024 lawsuit brought by a screenwriter over a World War II project that he didn't follow through on.
A reminder that even legends navigate the murky waters of Hollywood financing.
So we've traced this journey from an isolated boy watching shadows on a screen to an architect of American myth and a global preservationist.
That preservation work is so crucial, especially the World Cinema Project, rescuing films from the Philippines, Senegal, Turkey, voices that would otherwise be lost.
And that leads us directly to the final thought we want to leave you with. Given Scorsese's career-long dedication to restoration, from saving his favorite film, The Red Shoes, to his global mission to find and rescue neglected films,
We have to ask ourselves, beyond the classics he's selecting, what contemporary, marginalized films being made right now are we not protecting?
when a future viewer tries to understand our culture, what are the next Black Girl or Tukibuki that are being ignored by archives and festivals today?
Films that speak essential truths about our world but lack the studio backing to guarantee their survival.
The question isn't just about what Scorsese is saving. It's about what films we, as a culture, are overlooking right now. Who is documenting our present? And who will be the Scorsese of the future, saving the cinematic treasures we are currently ignoring?
Something to mull over.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.